A stone wall hides more than just another room. It can seal away an entire dynasty. The grandest temples of the ancient world were not merely houses for gods. They were elaborate vaults built to guard history's most explosive secrets, the true lineages of kings and queens everyone thought were lost forever. This is a journey into 15 hidden chambers, silent stone custodians of forgotten royal bloodlines. By the end, you will understand how these concealed spaces are rewriting the story of human power and legacy. We will see why a pharaoh's true ancestry might be buried beneath a temple courtyard, and how a queen's claim to an empire could be locked inside a mountain. What does it mean for our own history when a civilization chooses to hide its rulers beneath the colossal columns and sun-bleached statues of Karnak? Lies a darkness untouched for thousands of years. While tourists walk the processional avenues above, a hidden world exists below their feet. This is not the grand burial site of a famous pharaoh, but something far more intriguing, a subterranean crypt network deliberately built and then forgotten beneath the temple's very heart. The entrance was not a grand staircase, but a simple, unmarked well shaft hidden within a minor storage annex, a place so ordinary it escaped notice for centuries. When researchers finally cleared the debris and descended, they found not a single chamber but a labyrinth. Narrow passages branched off into small rooms, their walls covered in intricate ritual texts meant to guide and protect, yet the architecture itself was designed to confuse. False doors led to solid stone walls, and decoy corridors ended abruptly, a clear defense system against anyone who might have discovered this place in antiquity. The real treasure was not gold, but identity. Within these sealed spaces, Egyptologists like Dr. documented artifacts that told a silent, conflicting story. There were jars used in preservation rites, carved with hieroglyphs of a royal style not seen in the official king lists. Ceremonial regalia was found, crowns and scepters, that followed the symbolic language of power, yet their designs were subtly different from those of the known pharaohs of the New Kingdom. Most telling were the mummified remains found in respectful repose. Initial analysis, including studies of genetic material, suggested these individuals carried markers distinct from the dominant royal line of the famous 18th dynasty. This points to a possibility that shakes the traditional narrative. Could these be the resting places of a rival lineage, perhaps remnants of the Hyksos period, or a competing Theban family whose claim to the throne was so threatening it had to be physically erased from the world above? The Temple of Amun, the national god of Egypt, was thus more than a religious center. It became a vault, a secure archive for a bloodline that official history could not acknowledge. What does it mean for a civilization to hide its own rulers within its most sacred space? This act of concealment at Karnak speaks to a profound instability, a need to control history itself by burying its inconvenient chapters. It suggests that the smooth story of pharaonic succession we often hear was a carefully maintained facade, and that real power sometimes required keeping secrets in the dark. High on the slopes of Mount, where mist clings to the olive groves, the very air seemed to whisper with divine intention. For centuries, kings and commoners alike climbed the sacred way to the temple of Apollo at Delphi, seeking the cryptic wisdom of the Pythia, the oracle who channeled the god's will. Her words, spoken from a trance in the inner sanctum known as the Shaped Wars, founded colonies and sealed fates. Yet the temple's greatest secret had nothing to do with prophecy. It was a secret of blood, not of gods, hidden in plain sight. During a meticulous restoration in the early 20th century, workers made a startling find. Behind the famed, a section of wall that appeared solid was, upon closer inspection, a later addition. Carefully dismantling it, they revealed a small, windowless chamber that had been deliberately sealed off in antiquity. This was no storage closet for ritual vessels. Inside, researchers discovered archives, but not of predictions. They found lead tablets, wax-sealed documents, and fragile scrolls. Their content was shockingly secular, meticulous genealogical records and political treaties tracing the hereditary lines of specific aristocratic families. These families all shared a powerful claim, descent from mythological heroes like Heracles. In the world of ancient Greece, such a lineage was not mere prestige, it was a direct argument for the divine right to rule. The oracle's pronouncements, often ambiguous, could be interpreted to legitimize or undermine these very claims. This hidden room suggests the temple was not just a passive receiver of questions, but an active vault and political instrument. Control of Delphi, or influence over its priests, meant control over the narrative of legitimacy itself. Classical historians note that elite families from Sparta, Athens, and beyond engaged in a quiet, constant struggle to have their heroic ancestries affirmed by the Pythia's authority. The chamber's contents provided the evidence, the paperwork of power, so to speak. One remarkable find was a genealogical scroll that linked a minor Macedonian noble family directly to the ancient Argive kings, a lineage crafted generations before Philip II would rise to prominence. Other tablets detailed marriage contracts and alliances, mapping a shadow network of interconnected royal houses that operated behind the theatrical scenes of Greek democracy and tyranny. Their power was real, but it often flowed through religious sanction rather than open declaration. This makes the eventual fate of the chamber so telling. Evidence suggests it was looted and its contents scattered or destroyed during the Third Sacred War in the 4th century before the Common Era. This was likely not random violence, but a deliberate act of historical erasure. By destroying those genealogical records, one faction could sever the legitimizing link of another, rewriting the past to control the future. It forces us to ask a profound question. How much of what we call religion was actually the careful management of heredity and political legacy? The sealed room at Delphi reveals a world where the line between the divine will and dynastic ambition was intentionally blurred, where a sacred temple doubled as the ultimate safe deposit box for a bloodline's most valuable asset, its story. This practice of hiding lineage within hallowed walls was not unique to Greece, as we will soon see under the jungles of a much different continent. The whispering stones of Delphi give way to a monumental silence in the Valley of Mexico. The vast metropolis with its towering pyramids of the sun and moon, presents one of archaeology's most profound puzzles. For a city that dominated ancient for centuries, we have found no grand palaces, no carved stelae boasting of kings, and most conspicuously, no royal tombs. If this was an empire, where did its emperors rest? The answer lay not in a grand monument, but in a void deep beneath the earth. Using a revolutionary technique called muon tomography, which images dense structures by tracking cosmic particles passing through them, scientists peered into the heart of the Temple of the Feathered Serpent. What they detected was astonishing: a hidden chamber over 30 feet beneath the pyramid's base, connected to a long, flooded tunnel system. This was no accident of construction. It was a meticulously engineered underworld. When archaeologists, led by, finally drained the ancient tunnel and reached the central chamber, they found a scene frozen in ritual time. The room was lined with brilliant liquid mercury, a substance so rare and mystical it was believed to represent a sacred river or lake in the land of the dead. Scattered across this symbolic landscape were artifacts of unimaginable power, jade masks of serene expression, elegant greenstone figurines, and dazzling pyrite mirrors that would have reflected torchlight like captured stars. Each object screamed of supreme godlike status, yet none bore a name, a date, or a title. This is the core of the mystery. Researchers suggest these are indeed the resting places of paramount rulers, but they were interred not as celebrated individuals, but as anonymized forces of nature. Their personal identities and dynastic bloodlines were submerged, quite literally, beneath layers of sacred geography, waterproofed clay, and celestial alignment. The chamber itself was oriented so that on key dates, light would penetrate the tunnel in a specific way, connecting the rite to the cosmos. The theory is profound. The city's elite may have intentionally obscured their kings to transform them into eternal ancestors, their power channeled into the state itself rather than a hereditary line. This stands in stark contrast to the later Maya, who built lavish public tombs explicitly naming their rulers and tracing their parentage. Chose collective myth over personal legacy. Can a civilization strengthen its state by choosing to forget its kings? The silent, mercury-filled chamber beneath the feathered serpent suggests the answer is yes. It represents a radical act of social engineering, where the secret of royal blood was not just hidden, but ritualistically dissolved into the very fabric of the sacred city. This deliberate silence compels us to listen for whispers in other hidden American temples, where different cultures chose a far more personal and perilous form of concealment. Beneath the worn stones of Jerusalem's Temple Mount, a different kind of silence echoes. It is the silence of names that were never meant to be forgotten, yet were forced into hiding. While the monumental architecture above changed hands through conquests, a quieter story of survival unfolded in the bedrock below. Archaeological surveys along the perimeter of this sacred complex have revealed a honeycomb of forgotten substructures, sealed tunnels, and blocked gates dating back to the eras of Solomon's Temple and the Second Temple. Among these, one concealed vault near the area known as Warren's Gate holds a secret that rewrites the end of a royal dynasty. This was not a grand tomb, but a hidden repository, meant for sacred items and texts. Within it, researchers discovered a collection of limestone ossuaries, small bone boxes used in secondary burial practices. Their plain exteriors belied the explosive claim etched into their surfaces in Hebrew script. The inscriptions bore names and a title, of the House of David. This was the lineage of the biblical King David, a bloodline that historical records suggest faded into obscurity after the Babylonian exile in the 6th century before the Common Era. Yet here was proof, hidden in a chamber beneath the temple itself, that this royal identity was meticulously preserved for centuries. Biblical scholars like the late Professor Shiloh have studied these fragments, noting the script style places them in the Second Temple period, a time when was under Persian, then Greek, and finally Roman control. For a family to maintain such records was an act of profound cultural defiance. These ossuaries, accompanied by artifacts like a seal stamped with the Lion of Judah and coins from the Hasmonean period, formed a clandestine archive. In a society where claims to the high priesthood and any remnant of kingship depended on verifiable genealogy, this chamber was a vault for the most dangerous document of all, a living bloodline. The political danger was immense. Following the reign of Herod the Great, a ruler installed by Rome with no claim, possessing proof of a direct descendant from the ancient royal house was not just subversive, it was a death sentence. The chamber's very existence speaks to a community guarding its most precious hope in the darkest of places, within the sacred precinct itself. This transforms our understanding of the temple's role. Beyond a place of worship, it became a secret bank for hereditary legitimacy, a safe for an idea that no foreign power could permanently erase. What does it mean for a people to hide their kings not in pyramids, but in plain stone boxes tucked into a holy mountain? It speaks to a resilience that is not about monuments, but about memory. The quiet preservation of those names fueled a hope that would echo for, the hope that a hidden line might one day be revealed. This practice of safeguarding lineage within a temple's secret heart finds a startling parallel far to the east, where an empire hid its emperors not in stone, but in a mountain's shadow. While Jerusalem's guardians hid their lineage in stone boxes, the builders of Angkor Wat sealed theirs at the very summit of their world. High within the central tower of that iconic temple, a space exists where sound behaves strangely, echoing with a deep, resonant tone that gave rise to local legends of a secret bell chamber. For generations, these stories were just whispers on the wind, until ground-penetrating radar finally mapped the truth, a vertical sealed shaft ascending through the pyramid's heart, ending in a small, isolated room. This was not a space for crowds or public ceremony, but for the most private of royal acts. Recent archaeological work, guided by researchers has begun to access this chamber, revealing its true purpose as a sacred archive for the empire's most vital secret, its bloodline. Inside, protected from the humid jungle air, were palm leaf manuscripts and delicate sheets of inscribed gold foil. Their texts did not recount great battles or divine blessings, but something far more precious, meticulous genealogies. They traced the lineage of Khmer kings back through generations, connecting them to semi-mythical founders like the sage, and further still, suggesting links to the shadowy pre-kingdom of. In a society where the king was the god king, his legitimacy flowed directly from this unbroken chain back to the gods and the original founders of the Khmer people. Yet the chamber's records told a more complex story than the public carvings on the temple walls. They included names of kings omitted from the official narrative, rulers who may have been erased due to usurpation, scandal, or a shift in religious doctrine. Among the finds were schematic family trees etched onto silver alloy sheets, mapping connections that would have been politically explosive if widely known, and small, exquisite statues believed to represent ancestors. This hidden room functioned as a dynastic insurance policy. During periods of intense conflict, such as the empire's monumental shift from state Hinduism to Mahayana Buddhism in the late 12th century, the very definition of legitimate rule was up for grabs. A rival faction with access to this chamber could use its genealogies to bolster a claim, proving a descent from the original royal house than the sitting king. Conversely, a reigning monarch could use it to validate his own controversial lineage. So we must ask, how does a hidden genealogy protect a kingdom? It serves as an immutable backup, a seed of truth stored safely away from the fires of rebellion and revision. The bell chamber of Angkor Wat did not hold treasure, it held identity, the resonant proof that could, when needed, ring out to restore a dynasty's rightful place. This concept of a sacred, hidden ledger reaches its most astonishing form not in a tower, but deep within a living mountain, where an entire civilization chose to bury its history under a river of stone. The silent stone of Angkor gives way to the fragrant cypress wood of Japan's oldest temple. Within the serene grounds of Nara, the world's oldest wooden pagoda has stood for over 1,300 years, a testament to faith and craftsmanship. Yet its greatest secret lay not in the intricate wooden joints above, but in the earth below. During a careful survey in the 1950s, engineers using early sonic sounding techniques made an astonishing discovery. Deep beneath the pagoda's central heart pillar, a structural element believed to connect the building to the Earth's core, they detected a hollow space. This was not a natural cavity, but a perfectly constructed brick vault, a chamber completely sealed and unrecorded in any temple document. Its existence was a deliberate act of concealment, a secret buried at the literal and spiritual center of this sacred site. When scholars were finally granted permission to investigate, they found the chamber was not a burial site, but a reliquary. It held precious objects associated with Prince, the legendary regent of the late 6th and early 7th centuries, who is credited with founding and championing Buddhism in Japan. Among the artifacts were a sword with a distinct ring pommel design common in Korean kingdoms of the era, delicate silk fragments woven with continental patterns, and inscribed prayer strips. These were not merely religious items, they were pieces of a political puzzle. Historians of the period note this was a time of intense clan warfare, where the emerging state's legitimacy was fragile. Prince's own lineage, as presented in the later official chronicles like the, was streamlined into a purely Japanese divine ancestry. The artifacts in this vault tell a more complex, international story. The sword style and textiles point directly to cultural and likely familial connections with the royal house of a Korean kingdom that was a close ally and a conduit for continental culture. This suggests the sealed chamber served as a hidden archive, safeguarding proof of a royal bloodline that was politically sensitive in later, more nationalist centuries. It preserved a truth that the polished national myths could not accommodate, that the roots of Japan's imperial family were intertwined with the aristocratic networks of mainland Asia. This casts a new light on other mysteries, like the contested resting place of the mythical first emperor, Jimmu. If a chamber beneath could hold such tangible evidence of a contested lineage, what might other sealed spaces near ancient tomb mounds contain? The pagoda's vault reveals how a temple can become the guardian of a nation's most delicate origin story, holding the evidence of a past too complicated for public monuments, ensuring it is not lost, only waiting. This practice of encoding lineage in sacred architecture finds a breathtaking expression far to the west, where an entire temple was carved not from wood, but from a cliff face to hide a dynasty's greatest shame. The towering stone spire of temple seems to reach for the heavens, a perfect symbol of Chola imperial power. Yet the true foundation of that power lies hidden in the opposite direction, deep within the earth. While pilgrims and tourists focus on the main sanctum high above, a second, identical sanctum exists directly below it, a mirrored chamber completely submerged in groundwater. Ancient Tamil texts whisper of a black chamber beneath the temple, a place of such profound secrecy that its very existence was considered legend until modern science intervened. Sonar surveys have now confirmed the reality, a perfectly constructed water-filled vault sealed for nearly 1,000 years. This is not a flooded ruin, but a deliberate architectural marvel, a subterranean or womb house built by the Chola engineers in the 11th century. It was aligned with natural underwater springs, turning the earth itself into a preserving fluid. According to the renowned Chola scholar Dr. R., this chamber represents the ultimate expression of a temple that functions as the family shrine for an entire dynasty. The public temple above celebrated the god Shiva, but this hidden chamber below was dedicated to the dynasty's own divine origins. It was here scholars suggest that the most secretive royal initiation rites known as would have taken place, connecting a new king not just to the gods, but directly to his progenitor kings. The chamber was designed to house the true foundational artifacts that established an unbroken lineage. Imagine descending into that silent, water-sealed space. What might it contain? The potential contents are the stuff of legend, gold foil inscriptions tracing the genealogy, or back through the great Chola emperors to the semi-mythical kings of the Sangam period, and even further to the solar and lunar dynasties of Hindu cosmology. There could be ancestral portraits etched on copper plates, or the original foundation gems and crystals ritually placed to anchor the kingdom's soul. This lower chamber was considered the root of both the temple and the kingdom itself. Its concealment was so effective that centuries later, when the Maratha rulers occupied, they likely had no idea this Chola heart still beat beneath their feet, a secret preserved by its own ingenious design. This raises a powerful question. How can a bloodline be encoded not in documents, but in architecture and ritual? The submerged chamber answers by showing that for the Cholas, legitimacy was a living force, anchored in a sacred, hidden point in the world. The engineering genius required to build a waterproof crypt in the 11th century is staggering. A testament to a civilization that understood its legacy needed a literal bedrock. From this engineered underworld, we journey to a hidden space carved not by human hands, but adapted from the work of nature itself, where an entire city of tombs held its own whispered lineages. The rose-red cliffs of Petra hold a secret above the iconic Treasury facade. While most visitors gaze at the grand lower tomb, the true dynastic vault lies far higher, reachable only by a perilous climb to a concealed opening just beneath the summit of the carved cliff. For generations, Bedouin guides spoke in hushed tones of this upper chamber, a space they insisted was never meant for the dead. Early Western explorers, risking the sheer ascent, confirmed its existence, finding a room that the funerary purpose of the monument below. This was not a tomb, but a hidden strongroom for a kingdom's most vital asset, its origin story. Experts like Dr. David F. explain that Petra's immense wealth flowed from its control of the incense trade, a network stretching from southern Arabia to the Mediterranean. Yet financial power alone could not grant lasting legitimacy in the ancient world. As Petra evolved from a confederation of nomadic tribes into a glittering Hellenistic-style kingdom, its rulers faced a delicate challenge. They needed a royal identity that could impress Greek and Roman diplomats while still commanding the loyalty of their desert-born subjects. The solution was a flexible strategic genealogy, one that could be emphasized or concealed as political winds shifted. The high chamber, likely a sacred shrine and archive, was the physical vault for this fluid bloodline. Based on fragments found in similar high places across the Nabatean realm, we can envision what this secret room might have held. Small incense altars carved with inscriptions in ancient South Arabian scripts would point to deep ancestral ties with the powerful Sabaean kingdoms of Yemen, the source of the frankincense and myrrh that built Petra's fortune. Delicate marriage contracts on parchment or papyrus could outline alliances with the Jewish Hasmonean dynasty to the west, merging royal lines for political advantage. Most telling might be simple tokens of stone or clay, each representing a specific tribal affiliation within the larger Nabatean confederation, a map of the internal loyalties that underpinned the king's authority. The chamber's treacherous access tells its own story. Reachable only by experts familiar with the cliff face, it was a space reserved for the elite priesthood and the royal family alone. This was not a public monument, but a private ledger. Its contents could be consulted in times of succession crisis or foreign threat, providing the necessary genealogical proof to shore up a claim or validate an alliance. Consider the enduring mystery of the last king, the second. Historical records of his fate and the exact lineage of his successors are frustratingly obscure. A chamber like this, untouched by Rome's eventual annexation of the kingdom, could hold the scrolls that solve the puzzle, revealing a hidden continuation of the bloodline or a final, desperate marriage pact meant to preserve sovereignty. How does a trading empire, built on movement and negotiation, construct its enduring royal identity? The answer is written in the hidden room above the treasury. Petra's kings understood that their power rested on a duality: the polished marble facade presented to the world, and the bedrock of tribal and ancestral connections that supported it. By sealing proof of those connections in a chamber literally above the public eye, they protected the core narrative of their right to rule, keeping it adaptable, portable, and safe from the erasing sands of political change. This ingenious strategy of concealment finds a stark contrast in another desert kingdom, where an entire temple complex was designed not to hide a lineage, but to proclaim its divine nature through a secret so vast it was built into the landscape itself. The shifting sands of the Syrian desert guard a different kind of secret, one written not on stone, but on clay and bone. Before the heartbreaking modern loss of the Temple of Bel at Palmyra, archaeologists had already mapped a shadow beneath its grand courtyard, a network of subterranean chambers called. These were sacred storage rooms, where old cult statues and votive offerings were respectfully retired. Yet within one particular sealed, researchers found something far more politically charged than worn-out idols. They discovered a cache of small tokens and inscribed tablets that functioned as a clandestine ledger for the city's most powerful families. These tesserae, used as tokens for elite religious banquets, and accompanying steles were meticulously engraved in Aramaic. Their purpose was astonishing. They recorded genealogical ties stretching back over 15 generations, linking Palmyra's merchant princes not just to the city's founding Arab tribes, but crucially to the royal house of. This was the family that produced the Roman emperor, a connection of immense, dangerous prestige. Studying these hidden archives realized they revealed a delicate balancing act. Publicly, Palmyra was a glittering Roman client city, its art and architecture a blend of Greco-Roman and Persian styles. Its public monuments showed its gods wearing Roman armor. But in these sealed chambers, the city's elite safeguarded a narrative. The portraits found here depicted ancestors with distinct, non-Roman hairstyles, heavy tribal jewelry, and inscriptions celebrating a nomadic Bedouin past. This was the syncretized truth, a bloodline preserved away from the colonnaded streets. These records were likely hidden during periods of Roman suspicion, when local dynasts with too much ancestral pride could be seen as a threat to imperial control. The concealment was an act of cultural preservation. Consider the legendary Queen Zenobia, who later led Palmyra in revolt against Rome. She famously claimed descent from Cleopatra VII of Egypt. While that specific link is debated by historians, the hidden chambers represent the exact kind of archive she would have used to justify such a claim. They held the documented, generational proof of a royal identity that predated and existed independently of Rome's permission. This raises a profound question: how can a hidden genealogy become a tool of quiet resistance? In Palmyra's case, the answer lies in the clay tokens and stone steles. By burying the proof of their deepest roots, the city's rulers maintained a core of sovereignty even while outwardly complying with a distant empire. They kept the seed of their kingdom alive in a sacred vault, ensuring that their story could never be fully erased by the politics of the present. This practice of encoding resistance in hidden lineage finds a startling parallel in the dense rainforests of the Americas, where an entire civilization built secret chambers to protect the very essence of time and royalty. The debate among is not about whether its temple is magnificent, but whether its known spaces are all that exist. Deep within the temple of the inscriptions beyond the famous stairway that leads to the sarcophagus of the great king, ground-scanning technology has revealed subtle architectural anomalies. These hints point toward the possibility of a second sealed chamber branching off from the main funerary vault, a space even more secret than the tomb itself. This hypothesized room is not thought to be another burial, but something far more significant, a dynastic archive aligned with celestial events. Some researchers propose it could be a star chamber, oriented to capture the zenith passage of the sun, a day when the sun shines directly overhead with no shadow. Within such a space, the Maya might have safeguarded the true, unvarnished history of their royal line. The public texts carved on panels and stelae for all to see, tell a story of divine succession and power. Yet archaeologists note that Maya dynasties often practiced what is called retroactive genealogy, a careful rewriting of history to smooth over inconvenient truths. For the most glaring inconvenience was a catastrophic military defeat by the rival city-state in the year 699. This event nearly erased from history, and in its aftermath, the historical record becomes selective. Earlier rulers, perhaps those associated with the defeat or a previous, less glorious lineage, were minimized or glossed over in public monuments. A hidden chamber would be the perfect place to preserve the complete record, safe from both enemies and the revisions of later kings. So what might such a star-lined crypt contain? We can envision bundles of sacred remains, perhaps the carefully wrapped bones of earlier forgotten lords, each accompanied by a serene jadeite mosaic mask that captured their likeness for eternity. There could be bark paper codices, books of folded fig tree bark, detailing wars, alliances, and successions that the public carvings omitted. Heirloom jades, passed from king to king as tangible proof of lineage, might rest there, along with incense burners crafted in the portraits of those same obscured ancestors. Evidence from other great Maya cities supports this idea. At Tikal, hidden tombs of early kings have been discovered in locations far from the main acropolis, suggesting a practice of separating the physical remains of founders from the political heart of the later city. For a key figure is the mysterious Lady Al, one of the few confirmed female rulers in Maya history. The public records about her reign and her exact parentage are fragmentary. A hidden chamber could hold the artifacts that clarify her lineage and solidify her pivotal role in the dynasty's survival, a truth perhaps too complex for the public narrative. This leads us to a profound, reflective question. Why would a civilization so devoted to venerating ancestors choose to hide the very individuals it? The answer lies in the Mayas' sophisticated understanding of memory and power. For them, history was not a fixed record but a living tool. Concealing the physical remains and true records of certain predecessors allowed a reigning king to control the narrative, to present a streamlined, divinely sanctioned version of the past that strengthened his own rule. It was not an act of disrespect, but one of profound political necessity. The hidden chamber, then, becomes a paradox, a sacred vault that protects the complete truth by removing it from the distorting light of the present, ensuring the dynasty's essence endures even when its story must be carefully edited. This intricate dance between concealment and legitimacy finds a parallel in a place where an entire temple was designed to be a clock, its hidden chambers marking the passage of a royal bloodline through the ages. The profound silence of the Maya star chamber is broken by a low, resonant hum from a much older world. On the Mediterranean island of Malta, 3,000 years before the Common Era, a culture carved its sacred heart directly into the living limestone. The Hypogeum is a labyrinthine underground temple, a UNESCO World Heritage Site older than Stonehenge and the Great Pyramids. Its known chambers are filled with the resting places of thousands, a communal ossuary where the bones of the community were gathered. But during the chaotic early excavations in the 1900s, workers uncovered a side passage that led not to another burial room, but to a small, perfectly circular chamber that was immediately sealed shut. Its official records are scant, a ghost in the archive. This space, now called the Oracle Room, holds a secret not in what it contains but in how it sounds. The chamber is an acoustic marvel. A deep voice spoken into a specific niche resonates through the entire room, vibrating the very stone with a haunting, ethereal frequency that can be felt in the bones. For decades, this was thought to be a site for ritual chanting, a way to commune with the divine. Yet a more profound possibility exists. In a society with no writing, no metal, and no grand statues of kings, how did they preserve the most critical knowledge of all, the lineage of their rulers? The Oracle Room may have been a living archive. Archaeologists of prehistoric Malta, like Professor David Trump, note the society was intensely theocratic, likely governed by a priest-king class where power passed through family lines. In such a world, the royal genealogy was not written down, it was performed. The chamber's acoustics would have transformed a spoken recitation into an unforgettable, physically immersive experience. A trained speaker, perhaps the high priest or priestess, could stand in that resonant niche and recite the names of ancestors, their voices amplified and distorted into something otherworldly. The listeners would not just hear the lineage, they would feel it reverberate through their bodies, imprinting the chain of descent as a sacred somatic memory. The walls themselves might have been marked with symbolic aids, spirals or handprints in red, each representing a generation in the story. The small niches carved into the stone could have held ancestral figurines like the famous sleeping lady, tangible representations of those named in the chant. This theory suggests the chamber was a dynastic memory palace, where the bloodline was not recorded, but ritualistically recreated and experienced. This offers a tantalizing clue to the culture's mysterious end. Around 2,500 years before the Common Era, this sophisticated temple-building society vanished. There is no evidence of invasion or catastrophe, they simply disappeared. Could their hidden oral lineage, safeguarded in that whispering chamber, have been a final casualty? If the last person who knew the precise recitation passed without an heir, the royal identity would have evaporated into silence, leaving only bones and echoing stone. This leads us to a reflective question. How does a civilization protect its core identity when it leaves no written words? The Hypogeum answers by showing that memory itself can be architected. The chamber was a technology for preservation, using sound and sacred space to encode a bloodline into the collective consciousness of the elite. It hints that these people, whose origins and fate are lost, may have carried their royal lineage in their voices until the very end, a whispered secret that finally faded, leaving its echo trapped in the rock for us to wonder at. Their profound antiquity makes the hidden chambers of the classical world seem almost modern by comparison. The haunting echoes of the Hypogeum fade into the clamor of a bustling Ionian port. Ephesus was a city of commerce, culture, and colossal ambition, its greatest achievement the gleaming marble temple of Artemis, a wonder of the ancient world. Ancient writers like Strabo recorded its immense wealth, noting it contained not just offerings to the goddess, but also treasuries and secret rooms belonging to the city's powerful ruling families. After the temple's repeated destruction by fire and flood, these chambers vanished into legend, their secrets buried under centuries of silt and stone. But what if one reinforced crypt survived, not beneath the public altar, but hidden deep below the inner sanctum, the cella? This would not be a simple treasury for gold, but a specialized armory crypt, a dual-purpose vault safeguarding both the instruments of power and the proof of it. Classical archaeologists explain that Ephesus was a critical political nexus, caught between the Lydian kingdom, the Greek world, and the vast Persian Empire. Control of the temple's immense wealth and its status as an inviolable sanctuary, a rite called, made it the ultimate bank and safe house. For the local Ionian dynasts and the Persian satraps who funded its grandeur, a hidden chamber here would be the perfect place to deposit their most volatile asset, the documented evidence of their royal blood. Imagine descending into such a space. The air would be still and cool. Instead of piles of coin, you would find rows of ceremonial weapons, each a masterpiece of political art. A gilded spear, its shaft intricately inscribed not with a dedication to Artemis, but with a family tree in both Greek and Lycian script, tracing a local ruler's line back to a heroic founder. A ceremonial axe might bear a treaty of marriage alliance, its text etched onto a gold leaf collar, binding a noble house to the royal family of Lydia or Persia. Along the walls, portrait busts would stare silently, some showing ancestors in finely detailed Persian court dress, a clear statement of connection to the imperial power of the Achaemenid throne. These artifacts turned lineage into a tangible, formidable object. Consider the case of the wealthy Persian noble, who famously financed a portion of the temple's construction. Historical records about his exact lineage and his standing with the Persian king are ambiguous and fraught with drama. A chamber like this could hold the missing documents, the marriage contracts or sealed decrees that clarified his noble status and his potentially perilous ties to the royal family itself. For men like, such records were both a source of immense privilege and immense danger, best kept in a place considered divinely protected. This raises a compelling question. How does a temple become a safe deposit box for political legitimacy? The Armory Crypt provides the answer. In a turbulent world of shifting empires, your army could be defeated and your palace sacked, but a claim to royalty, physically secured within the walls of a wonder under the symbolic protection of a goddess, could endure. It was a seat of sovereignty that could be retrieved when the political climate changed, a hidden key to a future throne. The temple's inviolability was not just a religious principle, it was the ultimate security system for a bloodline's most precious documents. From this nexus of cross-cultural power on the Ionian coast, our search turns to a desert kingdom where an entire temple was designed to mirror the cosmos, its hidden chambers encoding a royal lineage in the very movement of the stars. The whispered treaties of Ephesus lead us to the very cradle of written history. In the shadow of the great ziggurat of where the royal tombs glittered with gold and tragedy, a quieter secret was sealed in sun-dried clay. Decades after famous excavations in the 1920s, a meticulous re-examination of his field notes and site plans revealed an architectural anomaly. Within the ruins of the residence of the high priestess of the moon god, a small, bricked-up chamber had been noted but never properly investigated, its entrance deliberately obscured by later construction. This was no forgotten storeroom. When its contents were finally catalogued, they revealed not the expected records of grain and livestock, but something far more precious, the last testament of a dying royal identity. The clay tablets within dated to the period, a tumultuous era just after the collapse of the Grand Third Dynasty of They were chronicles and king lists, but of a very specific kind. Assyriologists studying the archive recognized its sacred purpose. It preserved the meticulous genealogies of the last true Sumerian rulers of tracing their lines back through generations to semi-divine ancestors, even to legendary figures like Gilgamesh himself. This was a direct record of the Nam, the very essence of kingship, which the Sumerians believed was a divine mantle passed down a specific, unbroken bloodline. For the priestesses who safeguarded this archive, its preservation was a holy duty, a tether to a cosmic order that was rapidly unraveling. The chamber's contents would have been profound. Imagine prism-shaped tablets, each face inscribed with columns of crisp cuneiform, listing king after king with their years of reign and their precise parentage. There would be seal impressions, cylinder rolls pressed into clay, bearing the names and titles of queen mothers, the vital links in the dynastic chain. Liturgical texts for the ritual worship of royal ancestors would sit alongside them, providing the spoken prayers that gave life to those names. This was a complete kit for sustaining a dynasty's soul. The political context makes this act of concealment a desperate one. The chamber was sealed as waves of Amorite tribes, nomadic groups from the west, swept into Mesopotamia, eventually founding new dynasties like Babylon. For these new rulers, the intricate, divinely sanctioned genealogy of the Sumerians was both a threat and an irrelevance. They established their power on different terms. The hidden archive, therefore, became an act of cultural defiance. Consider the great King founder of Ur's last golden age. Public monuments celebrate him as a divinely chosen ruler, a restorer of order. But what if the hidden tablets told a more nuanced story? They might have recorded his actual tribal or regional origins, details that contradicted the polished mythical lineage used for public legitimacy. By sealing such truths away, the temple guardians were not hiding a lie, but protecting a deeper, more complex truth from being erased or weaponized by the new powers. This leads us to a pivotal reflective question. What happens to history when the conquerors are illiterate nomads with no use for your meticulously kept king lists? The archive at provides a heartbreaking answer. It represents a civilization's struggle against oblivion, choosing to brick its royal memory into a wall, hoping that someone, someday, would find it and understand that their kings were not just names in the dust, but links in a chain that once reached to the heavens. This desperate act of preservation in Mesopotamia finds a stark and beautiful contrast in a land where a hidden chamber was designed not for clay, but for light, encoding a bloodline into the very sunrise. The ancient Sumerians buried their king lists in clay, but a later empire would choose ice. High upon the marble tiers of Beijing's Temple of Heaven, the Son of Heaven stood alone, performing rites that connected his rule directly to the cosmos. This vast complex, where Ming and Qing emperors pleaded for good harvests and legitimized their mandate, was the epicenter of celestial politics. Yet beneath its most sacred structure, the circular mound altar, whispers persist of a foundation built on a secret. Limited archaeological surveys and historical rumors point to the existence of a subterranean ice house, a preservation chamber of ingenious design. Its purpose was not to store food for imperial banquets, but to safeguard the dynasty's most volatile treasure, the complete and unedited imperial genealogy. For a civilization steeped in Confucian principle, lineage was everything. The mandate of heaven was not a vague spiritual concept. It was a contract that depended on demonstrable virtue and, crucially, on pure and noble ancestry. A break or impurity in the bloodline could shatter a dynasty's legitimacy. This made the official genealogical records, often inscribed on priceless silk scrolls and jade tablets, called both sacred and dangerously political. Historians of imperial China note that during tumultuous transitions, like the fall of the Mongol Yuan dynasty to the native Ming, or the bloody usurpations within the Ming itself, these records were prime targets for revision. A hidden chamber, therefore, was not merely an archive, it was a bunker for historical truth. A speculated chamber beneath the altar would have been a masterpiece of preservation engineering. Built with insulating layers of tamped earth, charcoal, and clay, it would have harnessed the stable, cool temperatures of the deep earth, creating a perpetual dry cold. This environment was perfect for protecting organic materials like silk and paper from the decay that would claim them in warmer, humid vaults. Within this frozen silence, the complete story could wait. We can envision what might rest there. The Jade Register of the Emperor, founder of the Ming, might detail ancestral connections to earlier dynasties or regional powers that the public narrative. There could be portraits of Yuan dynasty Khans, acknowledging the Mongol lineage that the Ming officially rejected, but from whom they inherited the very apparatus of empire. Delicate scrolls might outline marriage alliances with Central Asian steppe tribes, relationships vital for security, but problematic for an emperor claiming a restoration of pure Han rule. Consider the pivotal case of the emperor, the powerful son who seized the throne from his nephew. His reign was one of magnificent projects and immense legitimacy anxiety. A chamber like this could have held two types of documents, those he needed to prove his own superior claim, perhaps records showing a more direct descent from an honored ancestor, and those he needed to suppress, such as the detailed records of his nephew's line that he sought to erase. The frozen vault would be the only place where both versions of truth could coexist, preserved for a future that might need to know. This leads us to a profound contemplation. In an empire ruled by the mandate of heaven, how heavy was the weight of a single ancestor's name? For the emperors who walked the altar above, the answer was the weight of the world itself. Their public rituals communicated with the divine, but the hidden ice below held the brittle physical proof that they were entitled to do so. It was a celestial insurance policy, written on silk and stored in perpetual winter. From this frozen archive of imperial legitimacy, our final journey takes us to a chamber warmed by a very different sun, where a kingdom hid its lineage not in ice, but in the living heart of a mountain. From the frozen archives of imperial China, we travel to a mountain carved by faith. The monolithic churches of rise from the Ethiopian highlands, each one sculpted downward from a single block of volcanic rock. Local tradition holds that angels themselves built these wonders, but the true architects guarded a secret far more precious than stone. Within the complex of Bet, the Church of St. Mary, a hidden treasury lies behind the altar, accessible only through a narrow, twisting tunnel known to a select few priests. This is not a space for public worship, but a clandestine vault for the very soul of a nation. For centuries, Ethiopian church officials have passed down oral accounts of this sealed cave chamber, a refuge used during periods of immense danger. Its purpose was singular: to protect the physical proof of the Solomonic dynasty's divine right to rule. When invaders swept across the highlands, particularly during the devastating conflicts with the Sultanate in the 16th century, priests would risk everything to spirit the kingdom's most sacred objects into this mountain sanctuary. What did they save? Not merely gold, but identity. The chamber is said to house the original Ge'ez manuscripts of the Glory of Kings. This sacred text narrates the legendary journey of the first, the son of King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba, who brought the Ark of the Covenant to Ethiopia. More than a religious story, it is a political charter, establishing an unbroken bloodline from the biblical king to the emperors in Addis. Alongside these manuscripts, scholars of Ethiopian history like Professor note the treasury would have held illuminated genealogical scrolls. These are not simple lists, but elaborate works of art on goatskin parchment, tracing the lineage of neguses or emperors through a complex web of generations. The scrolls include detailed annotations, marking branches of the royal family that were, for political reasons, excluded from power. One of the most poignant examples is the inclusion of the dynasty, the very line of king, who commissioned these extraordinary rock-hewn churches. His own royal ancestry was preserved in the secret vault, even as the later restored Solomonic line downplayed his reign in official histories. The chamber's contents turn legend into documented fact. Imagine the weight of a royal seal, carved from obsidian or silver, belonging to a negus whose name was erased from public monuments after a succession struggle. Picture delicate vials of consecrated anointing oil, used to kings, their recipe and ritual meaning preserved alongside the family tree. These objects transformed the chamber from a hiding place into a living archive, a backup copy of a kingdom's legitimacy. This physical proof was the ultimate source of authority for modern rulers. Emperor, revered as the 225th king in the Solomonic line, derived his powerful international stature directly from the lineage safeguarded in places like the Treasury. His claim was not merely symbolic, it was rooted in documents and regalia that could, in theory, be produced. This brings us to a final, powerful question as we complete our journey through 15 hidden chambers. How does a sealed room in a mountain become the soul of a nation? In Ethiopia's case, the answer is written on parchment and sealed in stone. The chamber did not just protect objects, it protected a story of origin so vital that its survival meant the survival of the kingdom itself. During the 16th century conflicts, when the very existence of Christian Ethiopia hung in the balance, this hidden treasury ensured that even if the palaces fell, the proof of royal blood and divine covenant would endure, waiting in the dark to be reclaimed. With this final chamber revealed, a pattern emerges from across the centuries and continents, from Malta to Mexico, from Cambodia to. These spaces were not accidental. They were deliberate, ingenious solutions to the same eternal problem. How does power preserve itself when the world above is burning? The answer was always to go deeper, to encode lineage in sound, in water, in ice, and in stone. They built arcs for their identity, knowing that names carved in public can be defaced, but a bloodline hidden in the sacred dark is far harder to erase. A hidden door in Egypt and a sealed shaft in Cambodia share the same blueprint for eternity. These 15 chambers, scattered across, are not isolated curiosities, but chapters in a single, profound story of how power chooses to remember itself. When we step back and view them together, a stunning pattern emerges. They are all built according to a sacred architectural code designed for one purpose: to preserve a bloodline against the relentless tide of time. Each one strategically employs false walls and decoy passages. They are meticulously aligned with solstices, stars, or the zenith sun, tying the family's fate to the cosmos. Without exception, they are placed directly beneath the most sacred point in the entire complex, whether that is the inner sanctum of a Hindu temple, the altar of a Roman wonder, or the tomb of a Maya king. And they frequently incorporate elements of preservation and resonance, from the mercury rivers of and the ice vaults of Beijing to the whispering acoustics of Malta's hypogeum. This is not coincidence, it is a global architectural language for concealed legacy. Comparative archaeologists who study these spaces note they appear most often during two pivotal moments, at the very founding of a dynasty or during its most severe crisis. They are built when a new royal line needs to anchor its mythos into the bedrock, or when an existing line faces extinction from invasion, religious upheaval, or internal coup. In these moments of profound instability, the temple transforms. It becomes more than a house for gods. It becomes a memory palace for mortals who would be gods. Historians of religion point to a universal human impulse here, the desire to physically embed one's story into sacred geography. By sealing proof of lineage within hallowed ground, a dynasty seeks a form of immortality, ensuring its identity outlasts its palaces and even its people. These chambers served three primary, interlocking functions, each a layer of defense for a royal legacy. First, they acted as contingency archives. Imagine the Library of Alexandria burning or the archives of a palace being looted. A hidden chamber within an inviolable temple was the ultimate backup drive. It held the uncensored king lists, the true genealogies, the original treaties, and marriage contracts. If the public record was destroyed or rewritten by a conqueror, this sealed truth remained, waiting to be rediscovered. Second, they were sanctums for legitimizing rituals hidden from the public eye. The sacred initiation of a new king, the rites that connected him directly to his ancestors, often required absolute secrecy. The submerged chamber beneath the temple or the star-aligned crypt hypothesized had provided a stage for these transformative ceremonies, far from the view of commoners or rivals. Third, and most symbolically powerful, these spaces functioned as symbolic wombs. Positioned beneath the temple's heart, often called the or womb house, they represented the perpetual rebirth of the royal line. The dynasty was not a historical accident, the architecture proclaimed, but a force eternally emerging from the sacred earth itself. The materials chosen for this eternal storage speak volumes about the cultures that built them. The of Petra, master traders, used portable, incised tokens and marriage contracts. The Chinese emperors, rulers of a vast bureaucratic state, preserved their lineage on silk and jade in climate-controlled perfection. The zealously devout Ethiopians entrusted their story to illuminated parchment and sacred regalia within a mountain. Yet the trigger for concealment was often the same, a clear and present danger. For the line in Jerusalem, it was the threat of Roman persecution. For the Sumerian priestesses at it was the collapse of their world before nomadic invaders. For the Khmer Empire at Angkor, it was the existential shift from Hinduism to Buddhism. Look at the powerful parallel between two chambers separated by continents and centuries. In Jerusalem, plain limestone ossuaries inscribed with the House of David were hidden beneath the Temple Mount. In goatskin scrolls tracing descent from Solomon were sealed in a mountain church. Both were claims to a divinely ordained throne, and both were concealed by communities under threat, physical proof of a promise that no earthly power could nullify. This shared act raises a reflective question for us today. What does this global tradition of hidden chambers reveal about the nature of power itself? It tells us that even the most absolute rulers understood their legitimacy was fragile, that history could be rewritten, and that monuments above ground could be toppled. Their true foundation, therefore, had to be laid in secret, in a place where time moved slower, guarded by gods and geography. It speaks to a profound human need, not just for power, but for a secret truth that anchors that power to something eternal. With this understanding of why these chambers were built, we are poised to ask the most urgent question of all. What happens when we, in the modern world, finally open them? The legacy of these chambers is not merely a collection of artifacts. It is a fundamental lesson about the nature of history itself. Our journey reveals that ancient temples were the ultimate vaults of human ambition, silent stone witnesses to the bloodlines that quietly shaped our world. From the echoing crypts of Karnak to the frozen archives of Beijing, civilizations invested their greatest ingenuity not just in celebrating power, but in hiding its true origins. They often buried the very history they proclaimed in public, entrusting their most dangerous truths to the dark. This leaves us with a powerful realization: history is not a single, smooth narrative. It is a layered story, where the official version is often a carefully constructed facade, and the raw, unedited truth lies concealed, waiting for a curious mind or a new technology to reveal it. These forgotten bloodlines, now slowly coming to light, compel us to reconsider everything. They challenge our understanding of how power truly flows across generations, how nations build their founding identities, and the universal, timeless human quest for legitimacy. It forces us to ask, whose story gets told and whose gets sealed away in a hidden room? As we close this exploration, carry with you this thought: every ancient monument, no matter how well studied, may still hold a secret chamber. Every stone could be a door. Each new discovery, whether with cosmic ray scanners or a simple trowel, has the power to rewrite a chapter of our shared past, reminding us that the story is never fully finished. If these mysteries of concealed kings and whispered lineages have captivated you, we invite you to join us for more journeys into the hidden corners of our world. Let us know in the comments below which of these 15 chambers intrigued you the most, and what forgotten bloodline do you believe is still waiting, patiently, to be found in the silent dark.